Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar called Enabling Cyber Risk Management. My name is Colin Lobley from a company called Stratex Systems and today we're going to do exactly what it says on the tin. We'll show you how to enable cyber risk management and introduce our software solution Stratex Point and how we deploy it for cyber to help achieve this goal. So today's session will last for about 30 minutes. We're going to very much focus on the management of the business pains of cyber. We'll explore assessing cyber threat-driven risks against those business objectives, and we're going to conceptualize, very importantly, a risk management approach rather than a cyber security approach. So when we mention cyber risk in the market, quite a lot of people just reach for a cybersecurity standard, give it to the IT director and leave them to implement it. The business is to some degree divorced from the process, and really it needs to be a business driven process. So that's exactly what we're going to explore today, our approach to embedding cyber performance and cyber risk management within existing management practices, thereby enabling the business to invest proportionately in cyber security, so investing the right money in the right place. So we'll highlight the benefits of this risk-driven or risk management approach and we'll provide an overview of how we enable that using our software Stratex Point. What we are not going to cover today, we're certainly not going to focus on the problems or threats. There's an awful lot of media out there, a lot of statistics, a lot of case studies around the latest threats, a lot of technical jargon, case studies around incidents that are happening daily and ever on the rise. So I'll make an assumption that we all know there's a bit of a problem out there when it comes to the cyber threat. And so today we're going to focus on solutions to that. We're not going to delve into any of the technical aspects of cybersecurity at all, and we're not going to champion or detail a cybersecurity standard. They have a place in the management of cyber risk, of course they do, but not alone. You know, there are a lot of other things that a standard won't cover, such as insurance to help manage your cyber risk, and all the various other types of treatment that you can give to a risk. So we're not going to focus on any of that. So if that sounds about right, then please stay on and enjoy today's session. So we'll start with a quick introduction, just to really put in place the latter part of the webinar that's going to focus on the solution, but we really need to understand what the common pains are. Why are we in business? Why are we doing this at all? So what are these common pains? What are their causes? And how we approach and offer pain relief against those. So we start with the 5 CPCs, which we call the common pains of cybersecurity. And these should be fairly familiar to you as a business. I'm guessing that's why you're listening today. So the first one, we have a crisis. So the increase in the number of incidents. I've already mentioned it. Incidents are continuously on the rise, both in volume, severity, and indeed complexity. So there's a bit of a pain around, you know, the threat out there getting bigger, getting more diverse, and how do we manage and keep up with the ever-evolving threat? How can we keep our risk management and security management current? There's increasing costs, so this is a big pain for a lot of businesses. There's an awful lot of money going into cyber security. It's being spent largely well by the IT community. There's a lot of soft factors involved as well, but all of this comes at a cost. And what is the right cost? I mean, we can all go for huge gold-plated solutions around security, and yet incidents will still happen. So very much today is around exploring what's the proportionate investment your business needs to make to manage its risk. There's also increasing costs around managing incidents, which have short and long-term effects. So the short-term impact of resource requirements to manage the incident, and then longer-term effects that can be reputational damage. If you lose IPR, you don't get first-mover advantage in the market. So there's a lot of incident costs to consider as well. So that's a big pain for a lot of organizations. Generally, there's confusion, particularly in the business community. The IT community understands cyber pretty well, and indeed cyber security. But there are persistently high levels of confusion up around the board level and across the organization, and it detracts an awful lot of management time and attention, or it's simply fobbed off to IT, and this simply isn't right. You know, the business has to grip the cyber threat and the risks it poses and manage and drive a proportionate cybersecurity program for your business. All of these things lead to a decrease in competitive advantage. So if you've lost some of your critical information assets, if your systems are offline for any reason and you can't conduct your operations, it starts to damage your ability to make money and your reputation in the market. Similarly, without the business really leading on the broader issue of what cyber is in the business and what value it's contributing to the business, it can't prioritize its investment to exploit that cyber capability. And by cyber capability, definitions these days are taking it more out of the simply the IT arena to cover information as well. So if we're not exploiting our IT capability, not exploiting our valuable information assets, which are a core competence of many businesses, it's the information we hold. If we're not exploiting that, then we're not getting gains in the market that we could. So without managing all of this properly, we're going to have a reduction in competitive advantage, and then a reduction in compliance as well. It's not so much that businesses are forgetting how to comply with things and it's a problem, but there is emerging requirements around what businesses need to comply with. So a couple of regulators here in the UK, the FCA, are making a lot of noise. It's the Financial Conduct Authority, are making a lot of noise around cyber at the moment and how to manage it properly and integrate it into operational risk frameworks. There's a new European legislation coming out next year that's likely to replace the Data Protection Act, particularly here in the UK and other European countries. And indeed, customers are getting much more savvy around cyber and they want to work with secure partners. And so in contracts, they're starting to stipulate clauses that you have to comply with a certain standard or even be audited by the customer. Particularly around B2B contracts, that the customer wants to come in and audit you to make sure you're going to look after their information properly, to make sure that you're a reliable supplier and that your IT systems aren't going to fall over and be compromised in some way. So there is a pain around reduction compliance. So if your business is seeing incidents, not understanding the costs or spiraling costs, if your business community are confused around what cyber security and cyber risk is, if you think you're losing competitive advantage and if you're concerned about compliance, then this is absolutely the right place for you. So those 5 common pains of cyber security, let's look behind it as to why those pains exist. And so surveys highlight the following as the principal barriers. So the first 2 there are financial related. So there's budget constraints, insufficient capex and opex, security spending not aligned to business objectives, and they go hand in hand. Now, clearly the IT community is always going to say that they've got insufficient capex and opex, but what is the right amount of capex and opex? If security spending isn't aligned to the business objectives, how do we know we're getting the right value from what money we are investing? How do we know if we're not investing the right amount? So without articulating or assessing our cyber risk, measuring it against our accepted risk appetite in the organization, we're not going to know where we need to invest in controls to bring the risk exposure down to within our appetite levels. So spending not aligned to business objectives and a question mark over whether there is insufficient capex or opex or whether it's just being spent in the wrong areas. A lack of leadership from the CEO and the board and the executive community as well, the chief information officers, CISOs. This is reported as being a problem. Now, particularly around the CEO and board, I've already highlighted, there is a deal of confusion around what cyber is and how to manage the risks associated with the cyber threat, and it's fobbed off to the IT community. Without this understanding, of course, they cannot lead and drive the business to become cyber secure. There's a lack of vision around how the future business needs will impact security. So again, it's getting that alignment between security and the business, and risk is really the translator between the two that we can use to get that alignment. The next couple are related to the information security strategy, which isn't aligned to business strategy and it's not aligned to risk appetite or tolerance. Again, that comes back to aligning security and business through the medium of risk management. Security policies not being aligned to business objectives, and this last one here was from the FCA's Risk Outlook last year, which is that businesses have got an increasing reliance on technology. Absolutely, arguably that technology is cyber capability, but they don't fully understand the consequence, risks and dependencies. So summarizing this, these pains exist because there is a lack of a business-led vision and strategy that integrates cyber into strategy execution, performance and risk frameworks. And that's exactly what we do here at Stratex Systems. We take that business view and we integrate cyber into existing frameworks. And that of course includes your operational risk framework, which is where we articulate and help businesses assess cyber risks. So our approach to soothing the pain, so firstly we start with a cyber strategy. We'll come on to show this in the software a little later on, but in Stratex Point it enables you to define your strategic objectives and develop a strategy map. And that strategy map is fully aligned and integrated within the business strategy, so our cyber strategy map. And this cyber strategy has got three principal elements. Firstly, there's governance and culture. So the strategy should really shape and execute the governance, so that addresses the leadership challenge out there, and the culture, so some of the softer aspects of cyber risk management around having good awareness, good skills in the company to manage the cyber threat, needs to be driven from the top and through the cyber strategy. And the third pillar there is risk management. So we integrate risk, cyber-driven risks, into existing operational and enterprise risk frameworks. So you're making the right decisions on cyber controls, be it cyber security, be it cyber insurance, be it tolerating the risk. It's all around integrating it properly there, so the business can drive the right investment and the right behaviors through the organization. And of course, by doing this, we turn pain into feeling good. And really, it's the flip side of the 5 CPCs we saw earlier. So by taking this approach, we are seeing in our customers a reduced number of crises or a number of incidents. And so robust risk-driven controls in the right area, as well as that embedded governance and culture, will reduce the frequency and impact of incidents. When we typically work with clients to start with, there is an increase in the number of incidents, purely that the culture is there, the incidents are being reported, the technology is there, the incidents are being detected, and so naturally there's a sudden sharp increase in the number of incidents. But that's perfectly natural. It's better to know what the problem is than not, and once we know what the problem is, then we can start doing root cause analysis, and again that helps drive those management decisions into where we need to invest controls to reduce the risk and reduce the number of crises. By doing this, you'll reduce costs, particularly reduce wasted costs, wasted funding. So a reduction in incident costs, as I mentioned previously, and you won't be wasting money on IT capability and security capability that isn't right for your business. Certainly a reduction in confusion, so we very much take this business-led approach. We integrate it into existing business frameworks that already talk the language of the business and that the business understands. So integrating cyber into performance frameworks, into strategy execution frameworks, into risk frameworks that are already in place and already well understood is the natural place for cyber to sit, because it then translates it from the very technical world and the technical jargon into language the business can understand. This will all help increase your competitive advantage. So the business perspective will come on. The first stage of that is very much identifying what cyber capability is in your business. And once you know it, you can start managing not only its risk, but also its performance. You can set KPIs around it. What value do we want from our cyber capability in the business? And then we can look to maximize that value and gain competitive advantage from it. And all of this mature approach, whenever any new compliance comes along, be it from a regulator, be it in new legislation, or from a customer, you'll be prepared to respond to that compliance challenge, or you will already have the controls in place and you can demonstrate compliance to whoever needs it. So that's a very brief overview of what the pains are and our approach to taking those pains and turning them into benefits for the business. Now we'll look at how we enable that using the Stratex Point software. So the first couple of slides are just going to show the underpinning logic and theory and capability of the software itself. Then we'll detail our business-led approach to cyber and overlaying a cyber-driven risk framework on top of that, and then we'll start looking at some of the very nitty-gritty into the software itself and how we map all of those business and risk frameworks from cyber into the software solution. And so Stratex Point is designed to support an integrated approach which enables sustainable strategy execution. So it's not just focused on cyber, it's focused across the business. And we start at the top with strategy management, and we work with businesses to say, right, what is it we are trying to achieve or you are trying to achieve? We define those objectives and ensure that there's robust key performance indicators around those, so we absolutely know where the business is going. Then core to all of this is appetite. So what's our risk appetite, or appetite for risk to achieve those strategic objectives? Then we assess the risks and do risk management to make sure that our risk exposure is aligned to appetite for achieving the objectives, and we integrate that risk management and the appetite alignment into performance management frameworks, and we typically work with the balanced scorecard so we can see whether we are on track to achieving those objectives. All of this is underpinned by a robust governance and communications and culture. And so the Stratex Point solution is underpinned by a conceptually sound data model. It starts at the top with those objectives. What are the KPIs around that, and what actions do we need to take around those objectives? Little tweaks to help us move in the right direction. What's our risk appetite for achieving those, and what are the key risks? The key risks, we identify those, and the software enables you to do an assessment around it, but also articulate KRIs, key risk indicators against those risks, so we can see whether they're materializing or not, and capturing risk events, so incidents. So you can start to see that whilst it's a generic framework, you can start to see how cyber can get mapped into this. And of course, risks need controls, and there'll be control assessments. Are these controls effective? And we look at KCIs down at the bottom here, key control indicators, that are a quick indication of how well those key controls are performing. So that's the absolute core of the data model going through it, and then we have these operational enablers that are also aligned to the strategy that we can map into it. So you can pick up each of these 5 boxes: processes, initiatives, systems, people and roles, and assets, and replace them in the wiring diagram where objectives sit. So you can have a process at the top, and a process can have KPIs around it, it can have a risk appetite, it can have risks and controls. Similarly with initiatives, systems, people, roles, and assets. And by putting in place, say, processes up the top where objectives is, it would actually sit, or is able to sit behind the objective. So you can say, okay, I've got this objective, let me now go underneath that objective and see what key business processes I need to put in place to help me achieve that objective. What systems do I need, and what information assets do I need to help me deliver that business process to achieve that strategic objective? So you can see how it cascades down in a pyramid of what your business needs to achieve, and sat at the bottom is your IT capability and your information assets that support the delivery of business processes that support the achievement of strategic objectives. And all of this is underpinned by a good governance model, so every item within the framework has to have somebody accountable and somebody responsible for delivering it. There's commentary, workflows, and audit trails there as well. The Stratex Point solution does come in 2 versions, so you can have a cloud-based deployment, or it's built on SharePoint. So if you're a user of SharePoint, then we can deploy it on to your existing SharePoint farm. So that's a little bit about the software and the key underpinning theory and the data model in there. Now let's start looking at cyber and how we map that onto this, which is all about enabling the measurement of the contribution your cyber capability makes to your business, and indeed enabling that cyber risk management. So firstly, we very much take that business-led view. We position cyber and information within existing business systems and processes. So if we look at just a quick sort of wiring chart of cyber in the business context, and this is the same for any business operating in the modern age. Every business these days is underpinned by IT. We cannot do anything without our IT capability, and that includes the infrastructure, devices, networks and systems. Now, this IT capability enables our business to do a couple of things. It enables our operations. So think about the digital operations that go on in your business. So trading floors, for instance, in financial services, customer interaction, web-based selling and customer-based websites. Our digital operations are increasingly the majority of operations within our businesses, and that's underpinned by IT, a large part of cyber capability. That IT also enables our information lifecycle. So we generate data, and then we have to we collect this data, we process it, we analyze it, and once we've analyzed that data, it becomes information. So that information is acquired. It's either through our data management processes, or we buy in a market report, for instance, or a data set of some description. So we acquire information either through our own data management processes or from an external source. We have to store that, again, on IT. We access it through our myriad of devices, laptops, tablets, smartphones, desktops, and then we use it. And how do we use information? Well, we read it, we socialize it, we turn it into knowledge, and that enables us to make a decision. And we'll look at two types of decisions. Firstly, strategic decisions. We make strategic decisions up at the board level, and that really sets our strategic objectives and sets the operational agenda. So we need a different set of information as well as those strategic decisions to make our operational decisions. Those operational decisions drive our operations, and it's those operations that help us achieve our strategic objectives. And those operations, how they're performing, funnily enough, generate data, and so the cycle starts again. And so the performance of our operations and our risks and our controls, so all those KPIs, KRIs, KCI data, that's data that can get turned into quality management information that the board can turn into knowledge to help drive their decisions again. So if you start looking at this kind of business system and where cyber sits in it, you can start to see how it's not necessarily something that needs to be set apart from the business. Certainly not managed by IT. It needs to be driven by the top. It shouldn't be on its pedestal and silo managed. It is just business as normal in today's age. So let's integrate cyber into existing kind of business frameworks, so we can once we do that and we understand where they contribute and the value they give us, only then can we start truly assessing the risks to that capability in the business. So once we've got that business framework in place, we then build a cyber threat-driven risk map. And this is multi-tiered. So starting at the top, again, all of this is about the achievement of our strategic objectives. So any risks to the business, whether they're cyber risks, market risks, financial risks, need to be assessed, or the impact of those needs to be assessed in the same terms of which we measure the performance of the business. And the performance of the business is typically, in any commercial business, around revenue or profit. So we have a financial objective on the top, and reputation helps us attract those customers and retain customers to drive revenue increases. So at the top we got those two big business drivers, reputation and revenue. Your businesses may have others, and our system can hold as many value drivers as you wish, but I've just chosen two for illustration here. And then right down there at the bottom, we've got the external threats, so the cyber threats out there. Now, okay, if these materialize, if they happen, there might be a direct impact on our reputation. But typically, the external threat and threats posed from insiders, so malicious insiders, those who are intentionally looking to do harm to our business by stealing information or compromising systems or taking systems out, and non-malicious activity, so accidents do happen. That's very much focused on the theft or loss of a device or the system being compromised. So that's the impact, the major impact from those two cyber threats. If our system's compromised in some way, our IT could become unavailable. If our IT becomes unavailable, then we have operational downtime. Our resource utilization goes wrong. We might not be able to meet KPIs that are set out in SLAs. We might get penalty clauses invoked. So we might not be able to, we might have to switch off production lines. We might not be able to get a deliverable out the door when we said we were going to get it out of the door. And all of that is going to massively impact your reputation and possibly your revenue as well, particularly if you get fined or some of those penalty clauses invoked. So as well as having unavailable IT, if we lose a device or our system's compromised, our information is at risk. So it could be stolen, it could be lost accidentally, or the information might lose its integrity. So somebody could intentionally go on and manipulate the information, so we can't trust the information we're reading and making a decision on or using for an operational process. And so our information in effect becomes unavailable. It's unavailable in the form we want it to be in, or it's no longer proprietary to us. And that means that we can't make those quality decisions that we saw from the business processes on the previous slide. And if we make poor decisions, then we're going to get in trouble with our reputation again, because we'll get a reputation as a business that isn't moving forward, or not performing as they should in the market through those poor management decisions. We might not be able to, those management decisions can also affect the quality and efficiency of our operations. And so there we have a cyber risk map. Now, a lot of people, when we start talking about cyber risk, will very much focus right down at the bottom there, those light blue areas, the external threat, the insider threat, reach for a cyber security standard, and that is it. That is their cyber risk management. But by looking about how it impacts the business, so looking at the cyber capability in the business context, and then looking at those cyber threats and how they impact the business, that's how we're going to enable the business to be able to manage its cyber risk effectively. So we're now going to walk on and see how we map that business-led view into Stratex Point. Time is limited today on this webinar, so we're not going to look in detail about how we map the risks or the threats onto it, but very much the thrust of today, I hope you're picking up, is to get the business framework right. And so when you map on your cyber risks into it, or risks driven from the cyber threat onto it, then you can understand it and assess it in the business context, and that's how the business is going to be enabled to make quality decisions around where it invests its cyber security funding and invests in other measures to manage the cyber risk. So within Stratex Point, there are 5 stages to mapping that business enabling cyber capability. The first is to define those objectives and develop a strategy map. Then we define value drivers. So what's driving value at each stage within the framework? So at the objective level, what's driving value there? Typically reputation and revenue. But what's driving value at the asset level, at the system level? Well, at the asset level, what's really driving it there, the information assets, is the value of the decisions that we make. And so any loss of information is going to impact the quality of that decision. At the system level, what's that driving value? Well, it's driving our digital operations and it's driving our information management. So the impacts of having no IT system or a compromised IT system are going to be on the confidentiality, integrity and availability of our information, and impact our efficiency of the digital operations. So we define those value drivers, and that's what we assess risk against. Thirdly, we'll define the operational and business processes that support the achievement of those objectives. And then under those business processes, we define what information assets we need to inform the delivery of the business process, and indeed what IT systems and hardware that supports those processes and the information management. So getting this cyber enabled business system into the software. So firstly, I said we define objectives, develop the strategy map. Here is an example of a strategy map, not exhaustive, but at the top we've got 4 perspectives down the side: financial, customer, internal processes, and learning and growth. They're the 4 perspectives that align to the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard. So at the top we've got financial. That's really the holy trinity of any business. It's all about increasing revenue, decreasing cost to improve profitability. And our cyber capability can make a contribution to that, and indeed a realized cyber risk can have a detrimental effect on those. Secondly, we've got the customer perspective, and so from a cyber perspective, or as a business perspective, what do we want to be? Well, we want to be seen as being reliable and sustainable. We want to be seen as being fair and honest, and being a secure supplier or business partner. And the achievement of those customer objectives is heavily influenced around cyber and making sure that we manage any cyber incidents effectively. So we manage our cyber risk effectively. Then we have internal processes, so we've got the information lifecycle, incident management and security processes there, and that's really the core of cyber capability. It's all about robust through-life management of IT systems and information. And at the bottom we've got learning and growth, which looks at the culture, training and governance. So what skills we need, what behaviours we want within the business. And if we embed that good cyber-aware, cyber-security culture, that's a massive step forward in managing our cyber risk. So we define those value drivers. I think I've covered this quite comprehensively already in my voiceovers of the previous slides, but this is how we measure value against all those different elements in the system. And here we've got really 2 categories of driver. We've got the availability, confidentiality, integrity of information and operational efficiency. That's what our IT systems are there to provide us, and therefore a compromised IT system has its risks assessed against those 4 areas, or the impacts of them against those 4 areas. And then up at that objective level and information asset level, it's all around making robust decisions to drive our good reputation and good revenue. And our security processes are there as well to get us that secure reputation. So behind these objectives sit business processes. So here we've got one example, which is the decision-making process, and the sub-processes behind that is the information lifecycle. So it's acquiring that data, turning it into information, and then exploiting that information, and at end of life archiving it or destroying it effectively. So all of these processes, sub-processes, can have key performance indicators behind it. They can have business process type risks sitting behind it as well. We define the IT systems and hardware. So here we've just got some examples of some IT systems and some IT hardware, mobile devices like laptops, our ERP system, our website and web server, ATM backbone, whatever the system is, they're there to support the information flows and the business processes. So we can add additional metadata to every single item within this framework. So here we've got who's accountable and who's responsible for this IT system, and whether it's an IT system or some IT hardware. And as I said, we can set KPIs against each of these systems as well as the processes above it to monitor its performance. Fifthly, we define information assets. So what are the critical information assets to our business? And you can see here again the metadata. We've got accountable, responsible individuals, and we categorize that information into certain sections. So here we've got financial, commercial information, project program information, personal, internal confidential if you use your own protective marking system. So we add this metadata just to bring further clarity to each item in the framework, and it enables stronger and more granular reporting at the back end. And again, with information assets, we can set KPIs against them. How do we want to exploit these information assets? And once we set that, we can look to increase value over time. So I said we wouldn't be talking about cyber security, very much a business and risk-driven approach to managing cyber in your business. So this approach, I hope you start to see, really takes the conversation out of the server room and puts it in the boardroom. It's about enabling your business to understand where cyber contributes to the achievement of business objectives, and therefore the risks to those cyber systems, and how the risks, if materialized, will impact your the achievement of your business objectives. And that is using terminology that the board understands. So this is very much enabling the board to make the decisions in investing proportionately into cyber security. So now we've got that business system mapped into the Stratex Point software in the framework there. It is ready to have the risks mapped against it. And through setting a corporate risk appetite, we can apply that risk appetite to each business process, to system, to an asset, and then we can monitor the exposure of risk versus appetite. So you know where you're investing appropriately within your cyber controls to manage the risk. And that is very much our view of business-led cybersecurity, certainly not a standard-led cybersecurity. And so that's just a quick reminder of that cyber threat-driven risk map, and we take those risks, those tiered risks, and we map it onto those business items within the framework. So at the bottom, the external threats we map on against systems. The middle tier around your information, well, we map that against information assets, and making poor decisions, we map that against the business objectives. And so we take these risks and we map it onto that business system. How we do this, there are 3 stages. Firstly, we define the risks and their key risk indicators and all the causes and consequences of that risk against each element type in there. So against those objectives, against the information assets, against the IT systems and the business processes. We'll set a risk appetite and we'll configure the impacts. So what does very high mean to your organization? Completely configurable within the software, because we recognize very high to a large organization is very different in financial terms to a very high from a small organization. And then we define the controls. And this is often where a standard feature, so we can take your standard or whatever controls framework you use and we can plug it in under all the relevant risks across the system. So all the IT controls can feature against each IT system. Human factor controls around is there a good culture in your business can be either a standalone process or feature under each information asset and the user communities who access and exploit that information asset. So we define the controls in there. It's not just a standard, there could be other controls in your business, for instance buying data loss insurance. Everything, so the business framework and the risk framework has got a proven ownership and governance model. So every single item, be it a corporate objective or a very specific IT control to manage a risk, has somebody accountable for it and somebody responsible for it. And once you map that business system, map the risks on top of it and put this a RACI framework around each item, people go onto the system very easily, score and update the KPIs, KRIs, KCIs that they are responsible for, and this is what you end up with. And so you end up with a lot of very nice management dashboards there, such as the appetite alignment matrix, some typical heat maps there, how you're performing against all your key performance indicators and whether you're on track. And it's all focused on the same business language, those value drivers that the board understands. And if a board gets something like this, they're going to immediately see, okay, I understand these kind of visuals, I can see where I'm overexposed, underexposed in certain areas, and therefore I need to drill into that specific IT system and implement more control there so I can allocate the right budget to the right IT system. And that's how the business gets enabled to manage its cyber risk and invest proportionately in risk controls. So it's been a fairly quick overview of how we enable cyber risk management utilizing Stratex Point. Hopefully that's been exceptionally useful to you. So just to reiterate, it's very much taking that business-led approach, mapping your cyber capability onto it, and once you understand the contribution and value you're getting from your IT and your information, can you truly start assessing the risks against it in terms that the business understands. And that is the only way of really taking cyber out of the server room, putting it into the boardroom by utilizing language a board understands. And between IT and the board sits risk management, who can translate those cyber threats into the risks for the business and articulate that to the board. So I've been Colin Lobley from Stratex Systems. Hopefully that was useful. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please do email me. I left my email address up there. So thank you very much for your time for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.